friends, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another reading wrap-up video. The first 2 months of the year are officially done, so let's talk about everything I've read so far this year, what was worth it, what wasn't, and what books I'm still thinking about. So let's go ahead and start with the books that I read in January. In January, I read 3 fantasy books, 1 fiction, 1 romance, and 1 thriller. So a good variety of books in January. And the first book I want to talk about is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is a sci-fi dystopian novel set on a colonized version of Mars where like the people are kind of divided into color-based classes. So, like certain colors are for certain things and like certain high ranking. In this book, we're following Darrow, who infiltrates like the elites of this world, and he tries to spark like a rebellion from inside of the elites. And it kind of follows the same format of the Hunger Games, where there's like these elites that are running this game where the lower class kind of have to hunt each other. I don't know if it was just the lower class though. I think there was some upper class in the games as well. But either way, there was this game hosted where they were hunting till the last one, kind of like a survival of the fittest type of game. And honestly, I had high expectations for this book because I had heard so much discourse about this book. I saw people crying to this book, so I just had a lot at stake when reading this book. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed all the sci-fi elements, like the weapons and the training, like the gadgets that they had. However, I was just not really invested in our characters whatsoever. And the storyline kind of lost me after the first like 4 chapters. Like it was a completely different story from like the beginning. And I'm sure that it goes on to make a lot more sense later on in the series, which I do want to continue the series. I was just a little disappointed by this first book. Like the way that the story was set up, it was kind of a lot of twists and turns. And it kind of made you lose focus of the true point of the rebellion, if you know what I mean. The pacing was also kind of off and on. Like sometimes the pacing would have a really nice flow to it, and then the next thing I was just kind of like not really caring about what was going on. Sometimes I would be really interested and hooked, and then sometimes I would be invested in like what was going on, but I wasn't really invested in like who that was happening to. So I really just did not have that emotional connection or investment in this book like I thought I was going to. So I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. However, I will be continuing the series because it definitely left off on a big cliffhanger, and I definitely want to know what happens next. I just was not really invested or emotionally connected to our characters with this book. And then the next book I want to talk about is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I feel like this is a book, if you're on TikTok, you've probably heard it talked about so much. They also just came out with the movie recently, and I really enjoyed this book. And in this book, we're basically following Millie, who takes this live-in maid position for this wealthy family. And very quickly, everything starts to feel really off and weird. And the wife is really like unpredictable and kind of painted as crazy. And the husband seems like way too good to be true. He seems like the perfect husband. And she's like questioning why he's with this crazy woman. This is a book that I literally flew through. Like I could not put this book down. I kept turning the page every chapter. I was like, okay, one more chapter. I was just hooked from the beginning, and it definitely paid off because that ending was actually insane. A lot of people may have seen the ending coming, but I'm not that type of person. When I'm reading a Frida McFadden book, I try not to look for like the plot twists that are coming or like try to dissect what the ending may be. I really just love to take her books like in the moment. That way when I get to the end, I am shook at what happens at the end, and it's not like, oh, I called that, I knew that was gonna happen. So with this book, I was fully entertained the entire time, and when the story flipped, I was so shook and so hooked. I wouldn't say I necessarily loved our characters. There was definitely moments where I wanted to scream at the characters and just be like, what are you doing? Other than that, I really enjoyed this book. It was fast paced, it had my attention hooked, and that plot twist was crazy. I've honestly yet to be let down by a Frida McFadden book, so if you like fast paced thrillers, I would definitely recommend checking this book out. And the next book I want to talk about is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This one is basically a gothic vampire love story following 3 women across the span of centuries, and it kind of just explores like topics of obsession, vampires, love, and like kind of how love and violence can sometimes go hand in hand, especially throughout time. Like I really enjoyed this book, and I honestly had so much fun reading this book. My attention was hooked the entire time, and it was definitely more character driven, but I really enjoyed that since we're following 3 different characters. I also really loved how their storylines interconnected and like it was all connected in the grander scheme of things. I also love that we got the perspective of why one of our characters was doing what she was doing throughout the span of centuries. And I really just love the way that the storylines would bounce back and forth, but yet all still connect somehow. So I definitely really enjoyed this one. If you're looking for a toxic vampire love story, I would definitely recommend picking this book up. The pacing did stutter a few times, but like not for too long. Like it wouldn't take me too long to get my attention hooked back on this book. And like I really didn't want to put this book down when I was reading it. But I think because it is very character driven, there was a couple of scenes where the pacing was a little slower and kind of just more like in the moment scenes. So other than that, I really enjoyed this book and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I also gave The Housemaid 4 stars. I don't think I said that. And then the next book I want to talk about is Sky Shade by Alex Astor. This is the 3rd book in the Lightlark series, and it honestly just picks up where Nightbane left off, where the stakes are still escalating, alliances are low-key shifting in this book, and the magic system is still expanding to where it makes me want to just keep reading and keep going with this series. I feel like every book that I read, it just keeps layering on more complications and more world building, and I'm honestly completely invested to see how it's all going to unravel and play out. Also, the plot is so good in this book. I feel like there is always tension building, and I feel like I'm never bored when reading these books. I really love like the power, the magic system, and the world building in general in this book. I feel like the magic system just keeps evolving and growing, and not in like a confusing way. It's just like everything is kind of clicking into place, which I really love that when it's like gradually over time the story kind of just like clicks together. And also the love triangle is still here, it's still present between Isla Grimm and Oro, and I'm honestly not mad about it. I absolutely love those characters, and even though it is messy and complicated and I honestly do not know who to root for at this point, I am so engaged and I honestly need to continue the series ASAP because I need to see how that plays out, but also just like the world building and the magic system in general. I just need to continue the series because the way that things are escalating, I know that the payoff is either going to completely destroy me or completely satisfy me, but I need to finish this series as soon as possible. And the next book I want to talk about is Wait For It by Mariana Zapata, the queen of slow burn. And when I say slow burn, I honestly mean that I honestly didn't even know who the love interest was until about 40% into this book, which is insane for a romance book. But basically this book follows Diana, who unexpectedly becomes the guardian of her 2 nephews, and she ends up moving to this new town. And her neighbor across the street, he is very grumpy and very observant. Diana honestly tries to keep things very strictly neighborly and very friendly. However, the more time that they spend together, they inevitably end up falling for each other. And I really enjoyed this one being a slow burn because we get to see them kind of fight those feelings for a good majority of this book, and in that time they build this really beautiful like foundation and friendship, especially with Diana having like custody of her 2 nephews. Like those are her boys, and the way that he fit into the puzzle was just so perfect, especially with it taking so long for them to actually become a couple. I just really loved seeing their friendship form before like any relationships were confessed. And like I wasn't swooning the entire book, but it was definitely more of a subtle romance, and I really just loved the everyday moments. And I also love the way that Mariana Zapata can build tension between her characters to where the romance just feels so real and so earned. So if you love slow burn romances, grumpy MMCs, found family, like this book is so good for all of that. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. And then the last book that I read in January is The Messy Years by Alexandra Slater. This was actually an arc from NetGalley, so thank you NetGalley for the arc. And this book is basically following 3 lifelong friends. We're following Maeve, Hadley, and Lizzie, and these 3 girls are all kind of navigating this confusing, chaotic phase of adulthood where like nothing's really playing out the way they thought it was going to. And each woman is really dealing with something different in their lives. However, their stories are still connected, and you really just get to see these women's friendship as they're there for each other. As like one character navigates grief, another is navigating marriage and like fertility problems, and another is hung up on an ex. And like through it all, their friendship is like the one constant that they have, and I think that is so beautiful. And I I honestly really enjoyed this book. I loved following the three women and watching them all deal with their life experiences differently, yet still it circled around back to the importance of their friendship and the way that it kind of grounds each and every one of them, even through like the messy, uncertain seasons of life which we all go through. She felt very honest and relatable in a very comforting way that like you don't have to have it all figured out no matter what stage of life that you're in. So I really enjoyed this one. It was a beautiful representation of female friendship and just life experiences in general, and I ended up giving that book 4 stars. And I would honestly recommend checking this book out if you want like a honest representation of female friendship and life experiences type of fiction. That was what that book was really good for. So those are the 6 books that I ended up reading in January. Now let's go ahead and jump into the 4 books that I read in February. I did not complete my February TBR, as you'll see in an upcoming video. However, I still had some really good reads in February, so let's just go ahead and jump straight into those. I ended up reading 2 romances, 1 fantasy, and 1 fiction in February. I'm gonna start with the fantasy book that I read because I've been dying to talk about it, and that is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I don't think I've yet to be disappointed by a Leigh Bardugo book. Like, the way that she just sucks me into her worlds is actually insane. Like, I've never been bored reading one of her books. The plot always has such a good flow to it. It always has my attention hooked. And basically in this book, we're following Alina, who is an orphan, and she actually discovers that she has a rare and powerful like magical ability that could actually change like the trajectory of her war-torn country. She gets pulled into this world of Grisha magic, power, and like politics, especially because of like the power that she has. It is so rare and so powerful. And the Grisha in this world are kind of like witches, so like they all have these abilities that they can use. And I honestly feel like this book set up such a good foundation for the rest of the series. Like, the world building in this book was so good. The plot and conflict setup for this book was also just so good. Like, I honestly cannot wait to continue the series because I'm honestly just so intrigued to see how the rest of the series is going to play out with how this first book ended. Like, I am fully locked in and like I need to read the next book as soon as possible. I love the world that she built and the magic system, and I honestly feel like it was just so layered but also so easy to follow along with. I really appreciated how easy the flow and the pacing of this book was. Like, this was a very bingeable book, and there was just so many plot twists that I honestly did not see coming, and it really made the second half of this book just fly by. And I also loved watching our main character grow into her powers. I feel like that is one of my favorite attributes of fantasy books, is when a character has dormant powers and they learn how to use them and suddenly they're like this badass character who is so powerful. I absolutely love that, and I honestly cannot wait to continue the series. It was so good. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. It was so close to a 5-star. I just did not have that overwhelming connection to the characters, but I'm definitely invested in the series. And then the next book I want to talk about is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This story takes place in a small hockey town, and like the entire community of this town, their identities kind of revolve around this junior hockey team. And like when the team does good and they're winning games, the town also does good. So like the hockey and the town doing well kind of correlate, until one incident that kind of changes everything, and it kind of forces people in this town to kind of confront like their peers' loyalty to this game and to this team, and also like question the ones who are in power of the game, and also the ones who choose to stay silent around this incident that happens. It kind of just exposes a lot of true people's identities and like how far they will go to protect the game of hockey in this town. And I'm not gonna lie, this book was pretty heavy. It did not shy away from any like uncomfortable moments or like truths of what happens to people when they go through things like this. And it was very character driven and emotionally layered, and it was honestly less about hockey and more about the people of this community, especially when they're under pressure or things are being brought to the light. And it really showed like what people are willing to risk in order to protect something that they love. And I feel like Fredrik Backman just writes his characters in a way that makes them feel so painfully real. Like, even the ones that you don't disagree with, you kind of have to like understand them on a certain level because they just feel so real. So I feel like character-driven stories that kind of explore morally gray areas and community dynamics, I would say this one is definitely a strong pick. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. And then the next book I want to talk about is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I think it is safe to say that I need to read every book that she has ever written. I absolutely loved this book. Basically, we were following Kristen and Josh. Who kind of meet in a very chaotic way. Like, they do not get off to a good start whatsoever. But as they spend more time together, they quickly develop a friendship and chemistry that is so undeniable. But our main female character, she is dealing with something like deeply personal that makes her kind of question her future, especially around relationships and like what she can get out of relationships. On the other hand, Josh just moved to the city and he is best friends with Kristen's best friend's husband, so they inevitably end up spending a lot of time together and they form such a beautiful friendship throughout the whole book. And Josh has such overwhelming feelings for her that he just does not give up, regardless of not knowing why her stance on relationships is the way it is. I thought this book was so cute and so funny, but it also had that strong emotional anchor with our FMC that honestly gave the romance a lot more weight than just like a fluffy romance. And the banter between these two characters was so incredible, like literally chuckling out loud, giggling, kicking my feet throughout the entire book. But then it would also hit you with something real. So I really enjoyed the balance between the fluffy romance and the real life moments. And I loved how they were genuinely best friends by the end of the book. If you like rom-com books but also want something that will make you feel a little deeper, I would definitely recommend The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. And I cannot wait to read more of her books. And I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. And the last book I read in February was Kissed by an Angel by Elizabeth Chandler. This is actually the edition that has the first 3 books of the series. So we have Kissed by an Angel, The Power of Love, and Soulmates. And this one follows Ivy after her boyfriend Tristan dies in a car accident. And she starts to feel like his presence still around and thinks that maybe he's trying to protect her for something because he's like trying to get in contact with her through her friends. I would say that this one almost blends like paranormal elements with romance and like a big mystery plot to the story, which I really enjoyed. Like, I thought that was a really good balance. A lot of the story actually focuses on Ivy like processing her grief while still also trying to understand what actually happened the night of the accident, because it starts to become clear that it wasn't just an accident. So there's like this underlying tension and intrigue to the plot in that sense, like throughout the whole book. Pacing was a little slow at times. Like, we definitely got a lot of like everyday moments and just like watching our character process her grief, but I honestly feel like it was very necessary for a lot of the emotional moments to really like land. And it also gave time for the mystery to really like unfold in a natural way. Although I will say that the ending, it felt a little rushed. But I also think that there's more books in this series, so I don't know if that's just a way to like end this part off and then it'll continue in the next books. But either way, I really enjoyed this one. I was thoroughly invested when I was reading it. I loved our characters, and just the entire buildup of the story was so unique and interesting in my opinion. And I feel like I ended up really enjoying the atmosphere, the mystery element, as well as like the relationship dynamics in this book. So I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in January and February. I feel like I had a really good balance of genres the past couple of months. I feel like I found some really good reads, some new series that I'm excited to continue. And overall, just really good couple of reading months, which is the perfect way to start the year. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!